Hello there, and welcome once again to Rebuilding the Collection, or Junking and Jiving with Jazz in Lockdown. I'm Paul Palmer. I'm still on this relentless mission to rid myself of those obsolete plastic briquettes known as cassette tapes, on which are stored many of my earliest jazz albums. I'm deciding which, if any, are worth keeping after being converted to digital form. And who better to assist me in this mission is the equally or almost equally obsolete, yet no less relentless Mr. Eric Blachman, who joins me from down the line in Houston, Texas. Hi there, Eric.
Hello, Paul. How are you doing?
Good, thanks. Yeah, I thought you'd frozen for a minute.
I thought I had to.
Great. Well, a reminder that we're discussing my cassette collection by album title in alphabetical order. It allows us to discuss different albums from the same artist in different episodes. So in our last episode, we were up to I can't remember, what were we doing? Eyes? I think we did.
I and J, yeah.
I and J, yeah. Brass Fantasy, I think, came to mind. I Only Have Eyes for You. So we're moving on to, and I've just got one K for you, and what a K it is, though. And that is Miles Davis, Kind of Blue, Columbia, 1959. And then we move on to the L's, and we won't do all of my L's today, but we've got Hubert Laws, The Laws of Jazz, and that came out on Atlantic in 1964. And I think we'll just manage to squeeze in Eberhard Weber later that evening, and that's on the ECM label, and that's from 1982, quite a bit later than the other two. So Eric, what do you think of those albums, and if you're indeed have anything to think about them?
The ECM thing, when I first heard an ECM album, however long ago it was or not, ECM stuff sounded different immediately. And I think likely to have put something back on, whether it was my turntable or in my cassette player, where I could,
Oh, what you mean? You returned the ECM to the sleeve, and
we have some players over here who are known to us in the United States as American players who I think did a stint or longer recording for ECM with ECM, and they made some ECM sounding-ish albums. My ears just heard it as kind of alternative, which is not a bad thing, just simply alternative.
Okay, well, let's crack on then, and I think we can only start at the beginning, the essence of what jazz is all about, the Kind of Blue album. Or is it? I've got a chapter here that's talking about Kind of Blue, and it says, is it jazz? However, this guy goes on to say, and he's my old, oh, sorry, I've just lost my earplug, my earphone. Right, yeah, this guy is my old teacher, Ian Carr, who was the trumpet player and leader of the band Nucleus. And he refers to Kind of Blue, perhaps the most influential single album in jazz history. And then its title, Is It Jazz? So it's quite, it may be controversial from a pure jazz existence, is this album, why is this album so radically different from what we hitherto have thought of as jazz? Have you any thoughts on that?
Well, if I think back to the time, it was a departure from bebop and the coming dawn of hard bop. It wasn't 2 chord changes, one of them at least being an altered chord change per bar. per measure per bar. It wasn't
Yeah.
fast paced. It wasn't Charlie Parker, and it wasn't Thelonious Monk, and it wasn't. So there were the things that it wasn't. And then if we read the liner notes on the back of the album, whoever wrote them, I can't recall. Speaking of freeing up the improviser to be more scalar and with the modal approach to not be locked in by a formulaic approach that had hitherto been a prescriptive answer. Kind of Blue is swinging hard, and it's got a blues, I believe, Freddie the Freeloader amongst the
Yeah,
tunes, which
that's correct.
sounds very straight ahead. And while the beginning of Kind of Blue might sound a little bit ethereal, nebulous, mood type of music, it locks in.
Yeah, I read that George Russell had a bit of influence. You know, the guy who we've already covered in a couple of albums, The African Game, which I don't think was a great hit with you, to be honest, Eric. But he published his Lydian chromatic concept of tonal organization for improvisation. And it offers a sort of alternative to using chords as the basis for improvisation. And I guess as more people became familiar with these ideas, it led to sort of a more florid approach and use of modal jazz. If you look at if you go through that theory book, it does lead you very much towards modes. But anyway, regardless of that, I think Miles was in a kind of minimalist phase, and he's very conscious of the fact that people were playing at 100 miles an hour and all this sort of thing, and was wanting to do and give his musicians less because he found they produce more. Simply that. So let's take a look at some of the tracks, and I don't know if you've got any favourites, but that first one, I remember performing it myself a few times with various bands. But that really, So What, the first track, really gives us the idea of modal jazz, the C major scale over a D minor, suggesting Dorian. So you've got that for 16 bars, is it? And then another 8 bars going up a semitone, and then back to the original 8 bars of D minor. That's quintessentially what that modal experience is. And how do you think that affects the sound, Eric?
The modal thing was shaking it up with making a lot more out of a lot less. As I hear it, laying down a blanket of harmony or harmonies that weren't as busy, weren't as fast-paced, weren't as tight and constricting and locking you in like bebop, and allowing the improvisers, Miles, and more so than even Cannonball, perhaps Coltrane, to superimpose ascending and descending scalar stuff all over the place. And when I hear Kind of Blue, I instantly think of Coltrane's so-called sheets of sound because of his technical displays over it. It's not the same Coltrane as the Coltrane who plays the standard repertoire with Miles of a few years earlier.
Yeah. It's quite staggering the amount of space the players have got for their improvisations, and the poignancy. I mean, you're right. There's no fast-paced numbers on this album. They're all medium-paced. A couple of lovely ballads. Blue in Green the most Spartan, and I mean, but for the solos, which are expansive and soaring, particularly Coltrane, and Adderley. You've got to mention Julian Adderley, Cannonball, as complementing that entirely. I mean, but for those solos, I think you'd listening to that, you'd throw yourself off a cliff, wouldn't you? I mean, it's so bare and Spartan and really tugging at the heartstrings.
Well, I can't throw myself off a cliff because I'm an obsessive, and so I'm dedicated to doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. But when you mention Blue and Green, I think it's the Blue and Green track where Coltrane plays the most haunting, somber, fantastic lyrical solo. And
Yes.
I think he's mostly in minor mode. And then
Mm.
Cannonball comes in and it's like daybreak. And he comes in being his jovial self, being very major and flatted seventh about it. And it's like daybreak. And this is what I took you to mean by the wonderful contrast and complementary nature in tandem between Adderley and Coltrane.
Oh
They
yes.
they play off one another, and there had been nothing like it before.
What is your favourite track on this album? Let's pin you
I,
down.
I think I love Blue and Green because of the way Coltrane, with the help of Bill Evans, is reinterpreting what Bill Evans does. You know, Bill Evans is sitting on some chords, letting them sustain, and Coltrane is by his no choice taking them in places you didn't expect them to go. So he's very much, I feel here, Coltrane is very much with this modal thing, an initiator. On Blue and Green, you really hear it in slow motion. Very, very, very lyrical.
Mm.
His haunting nature just does it for me. Of course, it goes without saying that "So What" is very catchy. A little bit like Omicron now, but very, very catchy.
I don't know whether that's staying in either. Uh, Partly
Oh
because
man,
by the time this comes out, it'll be a different variant. So
the beginning of Conda Blue, it's of "So What" itself is an immediate break from traditions. I am not encyclopedic with my knowledge, but I don't ever remember uh, an American jazz player starting a tune in the way that Bill Evans starts "So What," and being given free rein enough to start a tune like that. I mean, you have
mm,
no idea what's going on. It's just a big rubato uh, type of display. It's very ethereal, very rubato, very somber.
yeah, absolutely. And a note about the title. So what was the term that Miles Davis used himself when people used to come up and say, you know, I really like your music. He used to use, yes, so what? You know, uh, and, that incorporates itself into the title of this very very unique and well-known track.
Yeah.
So, well, I think we've done Kind of Blue. I think this is a definite hit with us. So there's no way we can be without this album. So I think we'll move to Eberhard Weber, totally different kind of album, a time in jazz history. And well, what can we say about Eberhard Weber? He is a bass player and from Germany, and he's known for, I suppose, being a lot more avant-garde. This album comes from the 80s, and it's kind of got its expansive. It's called later that evening. It's got four expansive sort of long tracks, and he's using uh, quite well-known musicians. There's Paul McCandless, the reeds, the wind player, the reeds. Bill Frisell, the guitar. Lyle Mays on piano, and he uses Michael Di Pasqua on drums and percussion. Um, are you familiar with this album, or do you have you heard about it, Eric? What do you think?
I'm not familiar with it. I was a little bit familiar with Lyle Mays. He's done a lot of work recently with tenor player Bob Shepard, but I wasn't that familiar with Eberhard Weber other than he was an ECM guy.
Well, let's just say that there is a highly experimental um, and I suppose quite a marked avant-garde element to this album. It's not jazz as straight ahead jazz as we would think of it. I mean, there are lovely expanded passages of jazz style improvisation, swing, which blend with other more freely played sections of music. And of course, having a reeds player who plays a variety of uh, instruments, including the oboe and the English horn, sometimes referred to as the cor anglais. There's this
Yeah.
kind of orchestral element to it. It's sort of almost, like I guess you'd say, a sort of Western European tone poem, a jazz tone poem, because the idiom of jazz is very present. If we were looking at tracks, I guess perhaps one of the most standout tracks is Mauritius. Lyle Mays, the pianist, who's known for playing with Pat Metheny quite a lot. He starts this off, and it's a very lyrical, beautiful balladic type of piano playing, florid, and then it kind of morphs into all the other instruments coming in, and as I say, they're playing a mixture of through written and improvised segments. Musically, I think it is a very valid, uh, uh, project, but I suppose it can bring us back to the question that I asked about Kind of Blue: is it jazz? Uh, it's certainly more of a hybrid even than Kind of Blue is. That's what I would think. But what we have to do is we have to sum up really whether we would digitize and keep this. So what do you think? Do you have any
Well,
view?
now that you said that, I'm not quite hearing it as having the swing thing lying within it, even in a dormant kind of way. And for me, kind of blue is still swinging. It's mobile.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
but it's swinging hard
Mm.
everywhere, every step of the way. Um, and in this, I don't really hear that. I'm much more attracted to this music though that I used to be long time ago, because music is music. Music
Mm.
seems to be in many ways quite simply intentional. Therefore, it's organized sound.
I think, on balance, I'm going to have to go with it. I think I would. I mean, it's one of those things. It's 30 plus years since I've actually heard this, um, and I've begun to listen to it again. And I'm thinking, yeah, there's a lot there. There's a lot there, and I'm sure if I had given time, I would really get to like this even more. So there's no way I think I could be without it, to be honest. We're going to move on to Hubert Laws. The Laws of Jazz. Now, what do we think of this? This is more familiar territory, I think, somehow. We've got a flute player, a very renowned flute player, but this is kind of really at the beginning of his career. It's I think if not the first album, this is one of his first albums, and it's got short songs. It's a straight ahead jazz set. They're all quite short. I think the longest track is about 8 minutes, and that's called Bimbay Blue. There's a couple of blues and some nice perky little numbers. Some people have said they border on the trivial, but when you listen to Hubert Laws' playing, I think you really hear some kicking jazz, really, some brilliant sort of improvising. The flute sound is absolutely lovely to listen to. So what did you think of this? We had a little listen together, didn't we, earlier?
I loved it for all the reasons you just stated. I really first got introduced to jazz flute with Joe Farrell and Sam Most, their album together, and Joe Farrell doing some other things with other people, who himself has a very nice flute sound or sounds. Hubert Laws is clearly, immediately to me, sounds incredibly well trained. He's throwing in double and triple tonguing, articulations, and his phrases are very nice. I think you had said earlier before we started recording that he allows for a lot of space. This makes it very, very interesting. I imagine that he's thinking about what he might play next in an unhurried fashion by virtue of allowing the space. I like the way the space punctuates the phrasing. And he sounds very, it's very uplifting stuff. His sound in his way has a lot of buoyancy to it.
Yeah, he's using, before he was called Chick, he's using Chick Corea. What was his name on this? I think Armando Correa.
Yes.
Yeah, Armando Correa. He plays a piccolo on a couple of tracks, 3 and 5, with which I'm not so keen on. The piccolo's a little piercing. What tracks are they? Black Eyed Peas and Rice. That's kind of a jolly little number. And the track And Don't You Forget It. My favourite is, I think, Bimbay Blue, which is a more expanded, it's that longest 8-minute long track. I just think it's a more sort of substantial piece that gives some kind of real bottom, if you like, to this whole album. You know, do you have a favourite track on this?
I would agree that that one in particular I find most attractive.
I think we've discovered a little treasure there, and once again, it's making its way into the digital collection. So, was there anything, I might as well ask you now, that I should, in the K's and L's, have been listening to at that time? And we're thinking of album titles. Off the top of your head, can you think of anything?
Well, I mentioned earlier the Coltrane album Lush Life.
Yeah.
Which is just stunning. It's got the Billy Strayhorn ballad Lush Life.
I'm going to write that down, actually, because and there was another album we're talking about that I should.
There's one that I did not mention earlier that I'll mention now for the first time. Live at the Lighthouse, Elvin Jones.
Okay.
Live at the Lighthouse is from either 1971 or 1973. the Lighthouse was a place or a venue or whatever out in California, and it's Elvin Jones post Coltrane, with two great tenor players, Steve Grossman and Dave Liebman.
Well, that's great. Yes, we've got a few more L's coming up, but I just didn't think I'd get through them all in this particular video. So I think we're nearly done. I think you'll have noticed there's nothing here from the 21st century, and indeed we weren't even discussing 21st century albums that we've missed, obviously because cassette tapes are very much before the CD era. So since we're looking at artists or albums with names alphabetically from the beginning of the alphabet, we should be including in our collection more modern offerings which begin with K and L. I haven't got any. We're throwing this out to our listeners and viewers, and hopefully somebody can come up with some albums that we should be including. So if you have any ideas on that, we'd be very, very pleased to hear from you. It'd be absolutely amazing if you could drop us a line. You can make comments in the comments section of these videos, and you can tweet us to @collectionbuild, which is all one word, and you can drop me an email, which is collectionbuild@gmail.com. So I'd love to hear from you, myself and Eric, and drop us a line if you agree with the decisions we've made, or let us know if you have any suggestions of your own. Next time, we'll roll on to some new alphabetical offerings, so see you then. This has been Rebuilding the Collection. Eric, once again, I thank you so much for your input. It's very informative. And I'm Paul Palmer.